Welcome to the You at Your Best podcast. I'm your host, Morgan. Before we get into the episode, let me give a little bit of an introduction for anyone who's new. If you like listening to someone process life in real time, or you are neurodivergent, an overthinker, a perfectionist, or maybe feel things deeply, this is the podcast for you. This is a non-professional, very human podcast about choosing authenticity over performance. My goal is to remind you to always come back to yourself. I talk about very deep things. I don't avoid vulnerability, but I trust you to know what resonates, what feels safe, and what might be too much for you right now. And I also share a journal prompt at the end of every single episode to help you think. So join me if you want to create a life that actually feels like you, so that you can become you at your best. All right, let's go ahead and get into this week's episode. Hello, welcome back. I hope you're doing well. For this week's fun episode, I am going to be talking about being type C and kind of just like what it explains about me. This is kind of just a fun reflection on some things that I've realized about myself. The other day I was on Instagram and I saw a video where this mom was talking about being both type A and type B, kind of depending on the situation. And I related so much to that. Like she, for example, would have her child's drawers super organized, but the room in general was a huge mess. And I was like, that is so much like me. And I learned that that is actually called type C. It's basically just being organized and messy at the same time. And that really got me thinking like how we can't really put people into boxes. It's not really fair. And how, like for me, it feels like I'm constantly contradicting myself. But maybe that's just a part of being human. Maybe humans are constantly contradicting themselves. Maybe we're all just walking contradictions. And there are some people who are more aligned with a certain personality, and there are some people who fit into a box a little bit more easily, but even those people don't deserve to be put into a box. And I feel like for me personally, people have spent my entire life trying to figure out which one I am, trying to figure out a box to put me into, and maybe there's just not a box. The funny thing is, I don't actually think I'm contradictory anymore. I think my brain makes perfect sense. It just doesn't make sense from the outside. From the outside, I can really confuse people in a way that people don't know what to categorize me as. And I feel like as humans, we find it really hard to understand things that we can't categorize or we can't simplify. And whenever it comes to another human being, that's almost impossible. Because for me, I'm responsible and irresponsible. I'm organized and messy. I'm serious and carefree. Depending on the situation, depending on the time, my home is almost always either super messy or super clean. And like for my daughter's birthday this past weekend, her birthday was planned out really well. To be fair, my mom and my boyfriend's grandmother really did most of the planning. But if it was up to me, I would have been perfectly fine to do all the planning. The birthday party will be beautifully planned, and then we'll get the gifts home. And I would just stare at the mess, wondering how I'm supposed to clean it up, because I have no clue. I can plan an entire birthday party, but somehow putting the wrapping paper away feels impossible. Another example about me with motherhood, I'm super protective of my daughter's emotional health, but if she eats a Cheeto off the floor, I really don't care. I care deeply about things that actually matter to me, but the other stuff, my brain just kind of shrugs it off. Almost like my brain lives on both extremes, because I'm both anxious and laid back, somehow introverted and extroverted at the same time. I overthink everything, but also somehow underthink a lot of obvious things. I rehearse conversations, but then accidentally say something completely wrong whenever I'm actually in the conversation. I love routines, but I get bored by routines. I need so much alone time, but I also desperately need connection. And it's so extreme on both ends. It's either I need to be alone and no one can talk to me, or I'm going to have a huge meltdown and I need to be in a dark room by myself, or I need to be spending time with people and connecting with people and being the light in the room. There are some times where I'll let something go immediately, and there are other times where I will be thinking about it for the next 6 months and constantly spiraling over it. It's funny because I don't know what part of me is going to show up each day. It kind of just happens. And a lot of the time it does depend on the situation. Like if I feel comfortable around certain people, if I feel emotionally safe, or if I'm super overwhelmed that day. It really does depend on that stuff. But other times it's just so random and it makes no sense. It just kind of happens. And I guess apparently it just depends on the day. I don't know. Another example I have is like with my photography. I'll plan like this beautiful vision. I'll have a Pinterest board. I'll have like cute outfits and props ready. It's very Pinterest worthy planned. And then we leave the house and I forget everything that I need for the pictures. Like whenever I took the pictures for my daughter's birthday, I remembered everything and like I did a good job keeping in my head of everything that I needed to do. I didn't even need to write it down to remember what I needed to bring. But once we got there, I froze and I was like, what the hell am I supposed to do? I don't know. And we had like this tank to fill up the balloon so that it could fly. And the tank didn't work. So my boyfriend had to blow up the balloon with his mouth and we had to tie it to a tree. And the pictures turned out great. They look amazing. They're so cute. But it was just so chaotic getting there. It was so well planned out, but also so not planned out at the same time. And it ended up working out fine. And another one is like I procrastinate everything, but somehow it always ends up getting done. No matter what, I will procrastinate. I do that with this podcast all the time. But my episodes will be uploaded on Sunday, even if that means stressing myself out so much Saturday night or Sunday morning to make sure that the episode gets out. I don't recommend doing this. It's very stressful. It overwhelms me a lot, but it's just apparently how my brain naturally operates whenever I'm not telling myself like, you got to edit this episode. And speaking of my podcast, another example that I have is I can like hear and plan out this most perfect episode in my head. Like I'll be just sitting there with my daughter and literally in my mind or even out loud say the entire podcast episode. And then whenever I start sitting down to record the episode, it's like I completely lose access to that version of myself. And I really struggle to get back into that headspace. So sometimes I'll over edit a lot. I re-record all the time. I over-explain myself. I get confused when trying to organize all of my thoughts. I get stuck. Eventually, I trust myself, but making a podcast episode is so chaotic and confusing for me. Every single time I make an episode, there are times whenever, like with this one, it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit more laid back, so I don't feel as stressed out while doing it. But even then, even while making this episode, I'm like, I forgot everything that I wanted to talk about, even though I planned it out yesterday. With all of these examples, I used to think that my type A side needed to beat my type B side. Like one of them had to win, and I really wanted type A to win. But now I actually trust both, and I have realized how much me being type C is actually such a blessing. Whenever my brain wants or needs structure, I can lean into that. But whenever my brain needs flexibility, I have that too. It's like I have both ends of the spectrum in my pocket whenever I need them. And that's so great. I can do this with parenting, knowing in the moment if I need to set a boundary or let something go for my daughter. And I've realized that I don't need to become one consistent person because I already am one consistent person. Me being type C, me being contradictory, that is my consistency. That is who I am. My consistency is that I'm adaptable. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the parts that I actually love because I've spent a lot of this episode talking about the things that are funny but like kind of annoying. Let's end on some gratitude for my brain being like this. So some examples. Since I am type C, I notice tiny details that a lot of people don't notice. I'm very good at being laid back outwardly while still holding structure within myself. And I do this really well with parenting and with photography, with my podcast even. I think so deeply, but my type A side can help me whenever I start spiraling into thinking too much. I can hold logic and emotion at the exact same time so well. And I think that really helps with me having a lot of emotional maturity that other people may struggle with. I can have ridiculously stupid conversations about the weather and genuinely enjoy it. And I can also have existential conversations within the same 5 minutes. I'm very flexible, and whenever I'm in a social situation, I can come off as really charismatic because I'm so flexible with what I talk about, and I'm okay with any of them. I'm very calm in emergencies, maybe sometimes too calm, but that's a really great thing to have. And my love feels limitless. I feel like I have this ability to just have limitless empathy and love towards people, and it never really runs out. I know for a lot of people, this is very normal and very common. They can sometimes get into this headspace of like, I'm so exhausted and I'm so drained that I don't have the energy to give empathy or love to other people. My brain isn't like that. I think me being type C has made it where I'm really good at just naturally showing people that love without even really thinking about it. I just love people so deeply, naturally. And I think that's one of my favorite things about myself, how I can be so loving and so empathetic to everyone, even if I'm exhausted, because it doesn't drain me to be empathetic or to show someone love. I don't feel like I have to push myself aside to show someone love. And maybe that's not fully about being type C. Maybe that's more of my own healing. But I think being type C has made it a lot easier for me to be able to show empathy for people in different ways, depending on however they need it, because I'm able to switch between different types of conversations without feeling exhausted or drained. I think humans are way more complicated than what simple psychology or like personality quizzes give us credit for. We are allowed to be messy and responsible, spontaneous and structured, anxious and relaxed. Maybe that's confusing to other people. Maybe people aren't able to put us into boxes, but honestly, I don't think it's confusing anymore. I think it's just me. And if you also feel like you're a walking contradiction, then welcome to the club, because apparently we're impossible to categorize, and maybe that's a good thing. And maybe you're not as much of a walking contradiction as it's just that you have different priorities depending on what your brain sees as meaningful. And maybe that's a way that you were able to be so flowy and enjoy life and happy, but also structured at the same time. That is actually such a huge superpower. For this week's journal prompt, I want you to write, what are 2 traits that you have that seem like complete opposites, but actually make perfect sense when you look at your life as a whole or them together? And I actually have an example of this before we go. I made an episode recently about how there are so many different things that I love to do, and they didn't really seem like they connect with each other. I love photography, I love writing, I love podcasting, I love learning about parenting and stuff like that. I realized that those things aren't actually contradicting each other. All of those things are connected by one thing, and that's my passion for bringing people together and understanding people more, understanding the human mind, and just human connection. So whatever that connecting factor is for you, use this journal prompt to try to find it. Okay, that's all for today. If something in this episode resonated, share it with a friend who needs a little reminder that they're not alone. If you want more conversations like these, be sure to follow and rate this podcast. Downloading this episode is one of the best ways to help this podcast grow, so be sure to do that. If you want to find me on social media, all of my links are in my link tree in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next Sunday.